Okay, great. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning still for some of you. Thank you so much for joining this leadership program. My name is Jonghwi Park. I'm the head of innovation and education program, which is hosting this leadership program. And I'm very glad to see all of you are very actively participating today. I'm a mom of 2 kids and 1 dog whose future is dependent on your leadership. So I really hope that our leadership after this session and then after this training will flourish to hold the future for the next generation as well as the young professional, young leaders. So the result-based project design, as you can see, the title of my session, it can be very boring. Okay, so be prepared. It can be very boring, very dry. But these sessions output would be dependent on your active participation and curiosity. So please be engaging in this session as much as possible. So, okay, so my session will be like this, because this result-based project design and management is quite dry and boring. I would like to start with a warming up session and then followed by some definition and key principles of the result-based project design and management, which is called RBM, and then applying RBM to your project design with group activity. Okay, and all the materials that I used here is in this handbook by UN, United Nations. So to start with, actually the project design principle, which is RBM. Has anyone have heard of this RBM before? No, eh?
So, I have not heard about the result based, but I have heard about evidence based.
Result based. Okay, yeah. So RBM, just to quickly, is the project design and management principle that all UN agencies are using. So I hope this principle or the approaches to designing and managing the project here today will kind of influence you or give you some kind of learning experiences to design your next project with this kind of result-based perspective. Okay, so warming up now. So what do you think are the most important components of the project design and implementation? Can you write in the chat box your thoughts? What would be the most important component? It can be 1 or it can be 2. Just something that pops up to your mind. Okay, I see feasibility, KPI, deadline, impact. Yes, that's good. Planning, team, expected outcomes and timeline, clear goals. Yes, great. Planning and detailed feasibility study, connecting actions and planning to the objectives. That's great. Policy and planning. Anybody else? Budget and feasibility. Yes, that's really important. Budget and feasibility. Aim, impact, and budget. Yes, 3 things that are really important. Anybody else? Leaders, yes. Yeah, leaders is also very important too, to lead and to provide a vision for the project. Yeah, so great. So I'm sure, yeah, framework, so that's good too. So I'm sure when you are thinking about designing a new project, you will think about all these things: budget, feasibility, who's leading the project, who are the team members, what would be the impact, what would be the goals that everybody has to achieve together, and what are the KPIs, key performance indicators. Right, so all of your answers are correct. So how are we going to comprehensively and systematically mix these all key components together in your project design is the main question today. So I will just give you some examples, and then you can tell me what's wrong with this project design, okay? So think about all these things that you just mentioned, okay? So project A, this is actually a real example that I experienced from my previous work at other UN agencies. So I'm just giving you a real example. So project A aimed to promote girls' secondary education in Myanmar. I saw 2 Myanmar colleagues here today. But so what could be wrong for this project? Anyone wants to jump in? You can just open your microphone.
Jonghwi, we don't see the image.
What image?
We only see the bullet point. It says Project A aimed to promote girls' secondary education.
Right. So what is the problem with this project? What could be the problem with this project?
Got it.
So one problem that I can see is that they're aiming at secondary education straight away.
I'm sorry. Yeah, they aimed at secondary education right away, right?
Yes. So that is one problem that I can see instead of focusing. Primary education is one of the prerequisites before moving to the secondary education.
Yeah, that sounds really correct. So why not primary education for secondary education only for this project? Anybody else? Probably colleagues from Myanmar would know.
Yeah, I think as you know, like it's linked with the SDG 1, the poverty, due to the poverty situation. So the some of the kids they can attend only primary, and they can't extend the other colleges and universities and other higher degrees. So as we promote the women to attend and to study higher education.
So instead of higher education, it aimed for secondary education, and then that aiming for higher education may be more beneficial for the entire SDGs, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's also
with lighting.
Right. So that's also correct, probably. I will just give you another hint here. Sorry, someone is not muted, so I can hear someone make background noise. So now I'm showing this data. Again, can you think the reason why this project is not really quite right?
Yeah.
Right. So let me just give you a real story behind this project design. So a private company, telecommunication company from the US came to UNESCO and saying they want to do this project to promote girls' secondary education in Myanmar. So they came with a project country, which is Myanmar, and then project topic, which is girls' education in secondary school. So they came with this pre-assumption. This is very common mistake, because if you can see here, the girls' education, actually, if you look at these numbers, the girls are actually doing better in terms of participation in secondary school in Myanmar, right? So you don't really have to do that project, I mean, as a big national project, because they have actually lower enrollment rate of boy students rather than girl students, right? What I want to say, what I'm trying to say here is, when you are trying to find a topic or issue that you want to solve in your project design, please check the data and see whether the data really tells you that the needs are there, right? Don't start the project design with a pre-assumption or assumption that you think that this is a cool project. But if you visit all the data, which I will show you later, where you can find those data, and you have to really design your project based on the data and evidence. Okay.
Yeah.
Another project here. So project B is a 2-year project that aimed at building capacity of community leaders in addressing local community and local climate change issues. It successfully met the project goals through the following outputs. So what the outputs from the report. So 1 capacity building program was developed, 30 community leaders trained, and 80% of the trained community leaders said training was useful and relevant. Now, anyone wants to point any flaws or anything strange or not qualified as the project evaluation?
I think the following outputs is not don't ensure that the trained leader can leverage the knowledge and skill from the program to actually address any local climate change issues.
Great. And so, yeah, that's exactly the answer. So it's another very common mistake by the project implementers and project managers. They just count the number of participants and say we did a successful project, right? But that doesn't mean we have now 22 of you, 23 of you here. So we all trained you guys as the professional, young professional leaders for climate, for the net zero initiatives. That doesn't mean after the 5 days, that doesn't mean that you guys really became the leader in your community or in your municipality or whatever. Hopefully we are achieving that goal by the end of the training. But many cases, there should be a lot of follow-ups and then a lot of continuous professional development to be the leader in this case. And also in this community leaders training, the same thing, we have to find another way to measure whether these community leaders actually are capable now after the training to deal with or to address local climate change issues. So this is all about actually result-based project management. So you learned everything already. So this is all about the project RBM, result-based project design and the management. You have to look at the data. You have to include all the stakeholders. And you have to look at the result, not the inputs or the activities only. So that's exactly what the RBM is about. This is the strategy, project management strategy used by UN, and include all actors contributing directly or indirectly to achieving a set of results, including national government, implementers, beneficiaries, like the local people, NGOs, UN entities, everyone. So when you are trying to get the issues right, you also have to interview or talk to the different stakeholders. So our previous activity was about thinking about the stakeholders, right? So you already expanded your thinking in your project. Who will be the stakeholders, right? And as I said, it should ensure the desired result, not just activities, and not just what kind of workshop, what kind of for example, what kind of manuals, what kind of guidelines you produced. It should be the result or impact this guideline, training, and the manual created. So you have to focus on that result to measure the success of your project. And cannot emphasize more the importance of the evidence. So when you are designing your project, it has to be based on evidence, not by assumption. Okay. So this is the RBM cycle that you're looking at now. Usually we do planning, monitoring, and evaluation, as you can see there. In our 5-day training, because of the time constraint, we'll only do this part. So setting the vision, defining the result map and framework, and planning for monitoring and evaluation. Obviously, we cannot do the implementing and then evaluating of your project because it's the kind of an imaginary project design. So this part, we will leave it to you for you to follow up and then follow through with your community. So now the first thing that we have to do is setting the vision, right? So to set the vision, of course, you have to also first understand the issues, right? To reach the vision, to reach the goal, we need to understand the pressing issues. What is the most pressing issues that you would like to solve? And then that's where I talked about this case of Myanmar. So you have to understand the target beneficiaries. The girls, secondary school girls in Myanmar are doing great. So you don't really have to, create another project where when the boy students are actually more struggling. Analyzing the readiness of all stakeholders. If you are trying to do an ICT training, or if you want to develop an app for your beneficiaries to use, do they really have a mobile phones? Do they have a mobile data plan that can support your apps? Do they have a basic ICT skills to digest your ICT training? So you have to analyze all this readiness of your stakeholders. Okay? It has to be always data-oriented, evidence-based. And then when you identify the issues, which will be our next activities anyways, when you identify those issues, so from the issues to the vision, what is the change that you want to see from the issues and 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, right? Is it the skills that you want to change? Is it the knowledge or attitude that you want to change? Is it the condition of the air that you want to change? Is it condition of the water that you want to change? What is the change that you want to make? So, So I will show you another example like this. So when I am talking about the evidences as I said here, data-oriented and evidence-based when you are trying to find an issues. So this is actually one of the assignments that a group of students of mine submitted for my course. So they wanted to do abandoned fishing gear reduction project, because in the Philippines, according to this group of my students, in the Philippines, there are so many abandoned gears, fishing gears, abandoned fishing gears in the ocean. So it actually affects the ecosystem of the ocean, and then it reduced the catch of the small fisheries. So it's actually related to a lot of different SDGs. So when I asked them to show me the evidence, they came up with this evidence. So this abandoned fishing gear, there's a large portion in plastic in the ocean. Close to 80% of the fishing gear gets lost in the ocean. Out of plastic debris collected at Japanese beach, it's like almost 60% are abandoned fishing gear. And about this much, like it's 46 to 70% of all the microplastic marine debris are estimated to be abandoned fishing gear. So they really identify the issue by the data that has to be solved really in a very urgent manner. So now I would like to actually introduce some of the databases that you can use. It's actually really fun. So at least for me, it's really fun to watch and play with all the data. So I will introduce you to some of those databases. Hopefully in your leisure time, you can visit those databases and then play with those data. So let me see. I'll introduce probably only 2-3 of them. You can play with it later on, but let me check with the first one. Do you see my browser?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the first database that I put it in the slide. So this is SDG indicator database. And you can start a global database. It's huge, so it takes a lot of time. So you can probably go to the country profile. So if you click it, you'll see a lot of different countries. Let me start with probably Indonesia, because we have a few Indonesian colleagues today here. So this is Indonesia, okay? And really useful is that you can see all the indicators at the left-hand side, and then you can see all the data on the right-hand side. Very easy to visualize. Okay, so no poverty so all these things are the SDG indicators. The proportion of population living below the extreme poverty line was, as you can see, from 1990 to 2018, you can see a drastic decrease of people below the poverty line in Indonesia, right? So let's see the climate action 13. Right, I just clicked the 13. So in the climate action under the SDG number 13, you see a lot of different indicators, SDG indicators. Okay, so these indicators are directly or indirectly linked with the climate action. So the first indicator is number of people missing due to the disaster. In Indonesia, unfortunately, in 2018, there were a hike of people displaced because of the disaster. And then it decreased again in 2019. I think in 2018, there was a big natural disaster in Indonesia. So that's why it was a big hike. All the way down, you can see so people with the destroyed dwelling houses due to the disaster. So you can also see all these things. So you can visit any other SDG indicators, clean water, for example, people with basic hand washing facilities on their premises. You can see the also dramatic increase in Indonesia from 2006. So Indonesia is doing great in terms of several or majority of the SDGs. Okay. So just have fun with these statistics. I will show you another one. the World Bank database. This is World Development Indicators, and I use this database a lot if you are interested in a specific data, because not all the data you can find from these indicators, SDG indicators. But if you have a specific data that you are interested, then this is the place that you find. So for example, in this database, you can also choose country. Let's go to Thailand. Right? And then series is the indicator. So series, you go there. And then I put already preset like a youth as the keyword. And you can see a lot of different indicators that has youth component. So what I did was literacy rate of youth in Thailand, share of youth not in training, employment, training, and unemployment rate of the female. Okay. And then you have to create the time as well. So time from for the last 10 years, from 2012 to 2021. So apply changes. Sorry about that, it sometimes does. Okay, there we go. So you can see here now literacy rate is quite high in Thailand of the youth, almost 100%. And then share of youth not in education is up and down actually for the last 10 years. And then unemployment rate of youth are kept increasing in Thailand, as you can see there. Okay, so you can play with this database as much as you liked. This is all free access. Yeah. And I also put other databases here for the specific SDGs. For example, ITU is dealing with the ICT indicators. If you want to know how many people has internet access or mobile access in a country, this is the place. UNESCO is all about education. If you want to see the enrollment rate, teacher ratio, and all those things is here. And the UNHCR is about the refugees, displaced people. So if you'd like to see how many people are displaced this year and last year, this is also okay. So far, any question? Okay, so let's move quickly because we have an activity to do. So now I will try to explain to you how you actually apply this result framework or RBM into your project design. So we call it result chain, or you may have heard of theory of change. So this is actually theory of change or result chain. We usually start with the impact or vision that you set, like a goal, vision, impact that you set. So what is your goal that you want to achieve? So to achieve this goal, what would be the outcome to contribute to this goal? And then to achieve outcomes, what would be the output that contribute to the outcome, and so on and so forth. So this is actually the framework that you have to use. Starting with the implementation, I think inputs and activities you are quite familiar. So inputs are, for example, resources, funds, technical assistance, the human resources, team members, those are inputs, right? And activities, by the way, is the usual activities that you are designing, like, for example, a workshop, a field trip, conferences, or interviews, or any creating the policy, those kind of things are all activities. Okay? But in the meantime, the outputs are the result part. So output, outcome, and impact, it seems like all similar and interchangeably usable, but in the world of RBM, that's not true. Output, outcome, and goal are all different. So output is the changes in skills and ability or availability of the product. For example, if you change somebody's skill, or if you created an app, that's an output. Okay, in the meantime, the outcome is, so by building a capacity of individual or person or the community, what did you achieve? Right, that's the outcome. By producing the app in output level, what will be your outcome? People are using the app to reduce the private transportation, and then they're trying to walk more. That's outcome, right? And then impact is long-term effect. So by making the people to walk more or trying to use bicycle, for example, more, what is the goal and impact? We are reducing the greenhouse gas emission and clean air, right? So that's the impact. So you can see how this input, activity, output, outcome, and impact are all linked, but in a different level. Okay, so this is just another visualization of those 5 steps. So in a real world, in a project design at UN, actually we are using different kind of documents or template. So it looks like usually this kind of headings, right? Impact, outcomes, outputs, activity, and inputs. We have a separate template that I included in this PowerPoint. You can see at the end, but this is usually how our thinking goes on. So let me put this into the perspective, right? So let's go back to the example that I showed you before about reducing abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear to protect the ocean in the Philippines, right? So in this example, the impact would be reduce the amount of ALDFG, abandoned and lost fishing gear in the Philippines. Okay, so for this, what would be the outcomes to reach this impact, the result? Like, how can we reduce the abandoned fishing gear in the Philippines? This particular group chose to raise the awareness of the fishers. Okay, so their main beneficiary was, or main target group was the small fishing community. So they chose to have outcomes of changes in capacity and performance of small fishing community by enhancing their understanding of the impact of abandoned fishing gear, by enhancing their understanding of causes of abandoned fishing gear. Okay, to reach this outcome, so what all the implementers will produce was, so as NGO, this group, they created manuals and videos for the fishery community to raise their awareness on this abandoned fishing gear. And because they know that this fishing community, fishers, they are not technology savvy, so they made the apps very user-friendly and easy to use to monitor the amount of this abandoned fishing gear. And they also pushed the local government to revise the marine policy. And activities to produce these outputs was policy development workshops for the revised policy, 3 training workshops for community leaders in the fishing communities, and 30 field trips with the fishers to see all these abandoned fishing gears all around the ocean nearby their community, what it has and what impact it has in their ocean and then clean water or the even ecosystem in the area. And finally, to reach these activities, to realize these activities, what are the inputs? Those are the capacity of HR, facilities, funding, and technology. Okay. So this is how actually we conceptualize at the UN to design a project that is result-based, evidence-based, and engaging all the stakeholders. So we now have impact and outcomes and outputs. So how do we know it is successful? Right, so someone at the beginning said one of the most important components is KPI, key performance indicators. That's definitely correct, because indicators are one of the most important components of project design. How can you measure the success or failure of a project? Indicator is one thing, but you also have to know the baseline data, because if you have indicators, for example, you want to reach 90% of the enrollment rate of secondary education in Indonesia, for example. But if you don't know the baseline, currently what's the enrollment rate of secondary school in Indonesia, then you cannot really say 90% of your target is actually reachable. Right, so you also have to have a baseline data, which is existing current data of your indicator, and then target. Okay, so indicators, we will talk about indicators probably on the last day a bit more, because it's a lot to digest. So impact indicators are long-term vision, like SDGs, like extreme people under the extreme poverty line, that would be impact indicator, right? By, for example, even by reducing the abandoned gear, you can reach the extreme poverty. You can reach the reduction of extreme poverty, right? So what would be the long-term vision which you are contributing from your project? Right? Outcome indicators can be actual changes of the group or situation, such as learning, improved teaching, improved management, and enhanced service quality. Output indicators, by the way, in the meantime, would be the number of school leaders trained, the number of workshops, the number of produced materials, so on and so forth. So usually the project design stopped at the output indicator level, but you have to go up to the outcome and impact indicator as well. So this example now you are looking at are output indicators, a percentage of community leader trained on the use of ICT. Can anyone trying to make this as outcome indicator? What are the changes that you want to see? Anyone?
Can you elaborate on the project information? Because
Yeah.
yeah, just
That's
see
true.
the difficult.
Right, yeah, that's true. So, I mean, this is output. So because of limited time, probably I will just go like this is the output indicator percentage of community leader trained on the use of ICT, but outcome indicator for one example would be percentage of community leaders who use ICT for the effective communication on climate action with community people, for example, right? So they measure whether the community leaders actually communicate with the community people on climate action using ICT, right? So that's the outcome level of indicators. Okay, same as the next one. Number of download of the project app is an output, and outcome would be percentage of app users who change their transportation modes for the last 3 months, from, for example, private vehicle to public transportation, from bus to bicycle, from train to bicycle or something like that. Right. So you see what the project manager or project team has to measure, not just number of downloads of the app, but what kind of changes this app actually created should be measured as the outcome of the project. And then this yellow box is the SDG indicators related to this. So the impact, the long-term impact, will be something like total greenhouse gas emission per year, which is really something that national government has to measure every year. And then under the SDG number 3, which is health and well-being, is mortality rate attributed to cardiovascular disease, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, chronic respiratory system disease, lung disease, right? So 3.4.1 under SDG number 3 is also related to this app users for changing their transportation mode. So you can see how a small project that you are doing can be creating an impact to the SDG level or at the national level or even at the global level. So we are just trying to expand your thinking span from your community project to municipality level, to city level, to national level, and then global level, and then long term. So now, I don't know, I think I used a lot of time, but we are now moving to the group activity. So I guess you have done your stakeholder group activity in the mural, right? And now we are moving to the issue identification. Okay, so if you go to the mural, probably Jerome will explain to you more. But for now, you just individually brainstorm yourself what are the issues that you want to deal with or address in your community for net zero, as many as possible. And then probably tonight or tomorrow, you can search for data to back up your issue, identified issues. So I will probably hand over to Jerome.
Thank you, Dr. Park. So as Dr. Park has mentioned, we will continue our group works. This is just a continuation of the stakeholders identification activity that we did earlier. It's connected. We are connecting the different activities that will lead eventually to your final project. If you click on the mural board link that I just sent in to the chat, you will see the new templates for our activity. So we have two activities, which are problem identification and vision and goal setting. So as Dr. Park has mentioned, this is the initial stage of our BM process. So first, you have selected the issue in your local community. So based on that issue, think of the other issues that are related or that is compounding that crucial issue in your community. So think about the different stakeholders and identify the interconnections of those issues with each other. So you can do that for the next 15 minutes. And then the next one, once you've identified those interconnected issues, you find what is your goal and what is your vision for your project. So for example, you can ask yourself questions. What changes do you want to see in the next 10 years? Do you want to see any institutional change or improve collaboration with the private sector or different other stakeholders? And at the end, write down the goal statement that you want to see for your project. So again, this is just an application of the RBM framework. And this is a good practice for your final project and also for your own personal projects at your work, at your community. So this is applicable to your endeavors.